Hi, I'm Gina, creator and host of Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that is designed to have real talk around all things midlife and strategies to help us live a more vibrant second half. It is my deepest desire to help other people shift the conversation toward empowerment, toward vibrancy, toward excitement about what life has for us and what we can bring to the world, how we can each individually shine our light. So I invite you to grab a cup of something wonderful, to join me each week or when you can, and join me in my living room to have these conversations. And if you are enjoying this, please take the time to subscribe wherever you listen, rate my podcast, and share the episodes that help you, the episodes that encourage you. Let's build this community together. Welcome to my tribe. I'm so grateful you're here. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and to live a more vibrant second half. Today, we have a different take on life and vibrancy. My guest is going to be sharing her extraordinary journey. She is passionate about mindset, gratitude, living life to the fullest with each day we've been given, living life with a purpose, a positive mindset. I want to introduce you to Dr. Erica Harris. She's a TEDx speaker, a podcast host, a cancer survivor, a double lung transplant recipient, and so much more. Erica, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to get to be here with you today. Thank you.
So the audience has some context. You're someone that I've followed on Instagram and I've watched your journey, and I thought I would love to get to meet you myself, as well as share your platform and your message and your incredible story with my audience. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, or begin to tell us about, your incredible journey?
I'm really humbled by that. Thank you. Yeah. So, I had lived a life incredibly passionate about health and wellness. I had served as a thriving sports chiropractor. I loved inspiring others to live their healthiest lives. And I certainly practiced what I preached by every single measure. I ate the highest quality of organic foods. I hiked every mountain. I soared down them all on my skis. I, spoke at my old alma mater of UBC as to how to live our healthiest lives. And I really propelled that message wide and far and practiced it, as I said, by every measure. And also with my family, with my young family. We were this growing family of 4. I had 2 babies at the time. I was still nursing. Life was truly, looking back, living a dream. We lived at the end of this family cul-de-sac, and our huge house was filled with family and friends and great food and great music. And all of that just seemed to disappear in the blink of an eye. I hadn't even complained of feeling sick or unwell. I was still nursing my youngest son. I was 35 years young. I had done this very routine lab. And I apologize for the siren in the background. I had done this very routine lab, and I had taken my 2 babies at the time to the Vancouver Aquarium for a day of adventure for us. And we went straight to the aquarium from the lab. And as I was walking into the aquarium, I was still tucking my passes back into my envelope or my wallet. And I had these 2 little sets of really excited legs of my little boys running ahead, and so excited to see all of their sea creature friends. And I had a very unexpected phone call, and there was a sound of urgency on the other end of the line, we could say. And it was the lab. And they were like, is this Erica Harris? Is this Erica Harris? You need to avoid all public places and go to the nearest emergency room. And I said, oh gosh, no. Like, I wasn't even emotional about it. I just thought it was a mistake. I said, no, I literally just left your lab. There's no way you could have my results back that fast. And And I'm the picture perfect image of health and wellness. Like, you got the wrong girl. Like, and I'm standing in the most public of public places in Vancouver as we speak. And gosh, I was just so entrenched in this vision of taking care of everybody else that I had lost focus of myself in this time. And I hadn't heard, the screams that my body had been screaming at me for a long time, because I had always underplayed my own health, I think. Although I did everything right, I just underplayed myself and overplayed probably my role in helping everybody else thrive and succeed. And I perhaps didn't get enough adequate rest. I was always looking for other people. Anyhow, I was shocked and dumbfounded. I ended up being diagnosed with what proved to be a very aggressive version of leukemia, acute myeloid leukemia, AML. It was a very rare version of AML that really only old senior men are diagnosed with. And again, I was 35 years young, still nursing my youngest, so it just didn't fit. I devastatingly did not respond even to the harshest of chemotherapy regimens. I had been admitted as a full-time, around-the-clock patient, as an inpatient, receiving 24/7 chemotherapy. I didn't respond even to salvage chemotherapy. I was devastatingly given a 2-month terminal prognosis. I was even denied all further medical care. This is back in 2012, aside from palliative care moving forward. And I fought to go home. If I had 2 months to live, gosh, I had a lot of living to do. I immediately went and sought a second opinion from a leading leukemia institute down in Seattle. I live here in Vancouver, Canada. So there was Fred Hutch, another leading leukemia institute in the States, in Seattle, just across the border. Devastatingly, I was given the exact same prognosis. I was told that I could do a few trials, but they would be ineffective. But go down in the name of science, let us learn from you. And maybe if I didn't have kids, I would have, I don't know. But having kids, that just didn't resonate at all. If I had 2 months to live, I wanted to spend every single minute with them. They were just tiny, tiny babies, and they would never have known how much I loved every tiny thing about them. I went home and I prepared for the worst. And people have always commented on my, positive mindset, and I just focused on the best. But in all honesty, I really feel like if we don't acknowledge this huge fire-breathing dragon of cancer or whatever we're facing, we don't own the power of it, and we don't rise to meet it to the sufficient degree. And so for me, also preparing for the worst didn't mean I wasn't expecting the best, but in reality, all forces are, I've got this 2 months terminal prognosis from these 2 international institutions. If my boys, as tiny boys then, grew to be 20 years old, I certainly didn't want them looking back on me and saying, what, she didn't even write me a letter, like thinking she was going to survive and then didn't. So I very much prepared for the worst. And I very much recommend that everybody does so. I think it really sets our mind and our vision into the importance of today, and really brings us back, hones us into what's of greatest importance. Anyhow, I went through all of those dire moments with tears streaming down my face, of doing those memory albums and heartfelt recordings for my babies, and, packing all the, preparing all the letters for like grade 7 graduation, let's say, or all the future moments. And that increased my fight on the other side of it, because I didn't want to miss those moments. I didn't want anyone else to take over this job of getting to be mom to the world's most 2 beautiful little mini men, And so as I prepared for the worst, I also expected the best. And I pursued any and everything in the natural healthcare realm. And miraculously, through those efforts, I had attained remission, this glorious, unexpected remission. When I was in the hospital, I rose from 26% leukemic cells to 87% leukemic cells. I was very sick with that prognosis. And miraculously, through all these natural healthcare measures, I came down to 0% leukemic cells. It was really phenomenal. And for me, I had always eaten, as I said before, a very healthy diet and regime. I had pretty much eaten an anti-cancer diet before I even had cancer. So I did make some dietary changes, but those were more minimal. I added green juicing, let's say, and I added a lot of animal protein, believe it or not. That was what was advised to me by all these forces all around the world. You need a lot of animal protein. And I think it was to build the building blocks of my blood cells. And so I added a lot of animal protein, did some other things on the nutrition front. But to be honest, the greatest transformation I would say I had in this time was mindfulness, meditation, just adopting a new calm, all these profound awakenings, this enlightenment that I really experienced, just so much. And I would say that led to the biggest transformation along that path. So I had attained this complete, miraculous, unexpected remission. And in the medical world, that's called a spontaneous remission. Only then was I then eligible to serve as a recipient for what's called a bone marrow transplant. Now, leukemia is a cancer of the blood, and our blood is produced in our bone marrow. And I needed an overhaul of my bone marrow so that I would have the best chance of long-term success. And the bone marrow transplant is known as the quote unquote cure to prevent against relapse. Because if you can imagine even one little nasty cell floating in there somewhere, this could all happen again so quickly. And with thanks to this complete stranger who rose from halfway around the world in my time of need, was I eligible to have this bone marrow transplant. He was my perfect match. And my only brother, who's a surgeon back east, was not a perfect match. And so this worldwide force was hailed on my behalf to find a match. And friends and family did campaigns and awarenesses. And it's so important. You can just do a little cheek swab and send it in. It's an international registry, and you could be the match for somebody who's waiting for that desperate second chance that they need to. And miraculously, I had some hiccups with the bone marrow transplant. I had some early rejection. I had a few rounds of septic infections, but overall I grew strong very quickly. And I was back to hiking all those mountains and soaring down them with my babies on our skis. And, you have to be pretty physically fit to be teaching a 3-year-old to ski and Whistler. It's a lot. Like you're bending over, you're carrying them a lot, yada, yada. But I was very physically fit again. But this burst in good health, as I kind of like to call it, for that short time that it was, ended up being really short-lived. And on my hikes, I just couldn't seem to get in enough air, and I couldn't seem to catch my breath. And at first, my physicians dismissed it, just saying I was so much more active than everyone else after transplant. And I was so grateful for that opportunity just to be alive for that day that I didn't care if I was hiking those big mountains anymore. I was so happy just to walk the flats. We have all these beautiful seawall walks here in Vancouver along the water. And so then I started walking the seawall, but then even on the seawall within a few months, I started to lose my breath there as well. And we had missed an earlier process of rejection that had set in. My new bone marrow basically woke up, my new bloodstream serving everywhere in my body, right? Decided it woke up and it looked around, and it decided it did not recognize my own lungs. And it embarked on this fierce process of attack through rejection. And I declined very, very quickly. I fell to 80 pounds. I was on full-time oxygen. Gosh, I lost the vision in my eyes from the high dose steroids that I was on. I couldn't drive. I couldn't see the television. I couldn't read a book to take my mind off of it. I felt like if I would walk across my kitchen, I would be so out of capacity. I would lose capacity of all bodily function. It was brutal staying the course of every day in this time. I was told then that my only chance of survival would be a double lung transplant. And for something great to happen to me, something terrible had to happen to somebody else. And how does one come to grapple with that? It was really brutally hard. And every day I didn't know if I was going to get this gift. And gosh, it was just such a hard time. It was such a contrast in worlds too, because with the first phase, I had been diagnosed with leukemia and everything happened so fast. I went from feeling super healthy to being admitted without even complaining of feeling sick, and lost the world that I knew within the blink of an eye. And then now I had this progressive decline every day where I was just getting weaker and losing so much more function every day without, being able to get a handle on it. And all the tools that I had just used to attain this miraculous remission, if I'm too healthy, that almost makes, we take these immune suppressants so that our immune system is nice and quiet, so it's not active, right? Mm-hmm. And so I felt like, am I making this worse with all my green juicing and everything else? I just felt so helpless to control this process that was happening inside me. And I often describe it to my kids like, with having the bone marrow transplant and then my own tissue, it's kind of like you have these two friends in the playground, and I couldn't get these two friends in the playground to get along. And I felt really defeated about myself after like achieving this miraculous remission. And then why can't I get control of this? It was a really brutal, brutal time.
So let me ask you a question then. Yeah. So that's basically autoimmune then. So your immune system.
It sounds very similar to an autoimmune, but except for the fact that it stemmed from basically I had two, and I have now three, but I had two DNAs within me at the time. So it wasn't my own DNA attacking myself. Right. But it was the DNA of my donor attacking myself, right? So it's the same process basically as an autoimmune process, but it's called rejection because it's really from the transplant, the donor tissue. That makes sense?
It does make sense. I had a friend who has had a liver transplant, and I do remember going through that process as she was declining quickly because she had to be at a certain point on a scale.
Yes.
A 40-point scale. And you had to be in the mid to high 30s before they would actively be looking for a liver for her. And I remember thinking, you made a comment about in order for you to be helped, someone had to die. And I remember thinking through that with her and what a challenge it was for me on the sidelines, praying for her healing and for her health, and the healing wasn't coming. And just knowing that, how do you pray for something that requires something so awful? I remember feeling that same sense of, how does this work? You don't want anyone else to not have their life so your friend can have their life. But at the same time, you don't want to lose your friend. It is a very difficult thing to process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really hard. It was a really, really hard time. And then yet, with two babies looking up at me and me wanting to be normal mom, it was really interesting because my mind, like I knew I was sick, but if I sat down, I didn't feel sick. I felt fine. I only noticed my lungs and in my head, I felt fine. If I walked across the kitchen, like I said, I would not feel fine. And I would know that somebody else could tell that. Right. But I felt like I hid it for the most part. And I think that helped me get through. Oddly enough, I felt like I looked far healthier than I looked. I didn't see how skinny I was. I knew I was skinny, but I didn't see when I looked in the mirror. I didn't see it in my head. I didn't see it. I thought that if somebody saw me out with my children, they wouldn't be able to tell that I couldn't breathe properly. And then fast forward, after my double lung transplant, it was Christmas time and I was so go, go, go. And my then husband was like, you're just doing too much, like slow down, And I'm like, no. Like, I'm just so excited I get to do too much again, And he's like, let me show you this video. And he showed me the video from the night that I had, we were down at a beach here in Vancouver, that I was told lungs were waiting for me. And I had always told my kids leading up to it, it was too much for them to process the process of a double lung transplant. So I would just describe it as a plan. There's a plan to help mommy. There's a plan coming, And I said, the plan's happening. And it was me really explaining that I was going to be away again for a little bit, in the hospital. And watching this video, oh my heavens. Like, again, if I look back on that time, I picture myself as a healthy mom. Then I see this video, like bones were popping out of everywhere. When I would even be sitting, I'd been sitting for hours before this video was taken. And it's like my whole body was just moving up and down just to get the smallest little sip of air within. And that's exactly why I was so tiny. It's not that I wasn't eating, but it's that my body was doing 2 marathons every day just to get enough sip of air. It's almost like, my good friend, Dr. Gabor Mate, refers to this, and he's coined this as the wisdom of trauma, right? And the wisdom of it is that we kind of push it down for a bit because that's how we survive. Sometimes it's too overwhelming to cope with, right? And so I had pushed it down in that time. It was a survival mechanism that I needed to do because I think inherently, if I saw myself as that sick, I don't think I'd be sitting here with you today. I don't think I would have made it. I needed to see myself still as this healthy, thriving being, as odd as that sounds, but I really did. I didn't see it. And I think it was my brain's coping mechanism to get through that in that time. Anyhow, fast forward, miraculously, I get this amazing call that new lungs are waiting, and I'm gifted the gift of new lungs through the family of another who made the most trying decisions. And was I gifted this gift of life and breath. And now as a result, gosh, the blood of another flows through every part of me and fuels, every moment. And then I breathe in life through the lungs of another, every breath. And how lucky am I? I'm here today thriving years later after all of this. And I'm just the luckiest girl in the world. I faced divorce 6 weeks after I was finally home from the hospital. I faced, some ups and downs after the double lung transplant because I was so immune compromised. I struggled with a virus. I was admitted for another year. I grew resistant to all forms of treatment to this virus. It's a very prevalent everyday virus. I just couldn't get a hold of it. And it was really dire at that time. I was called again, the Hail Mary of our province's largest hospital. Nobody really knew what to do with me. They were looking at trials in Pittsburgh. And then miraculously, in the spring of 2017, Easter weekend, literally, I just grew these immunoglobulins, and I kind of had this Easter miracle. I grew these immunoglobulins to this darn bug, and I started to grow strong. And then finally I was it was kind of my turning point was that spring in 2017. And then I was finally back home and on the home front. All the while, I will say, even when I was in the hospital, I would get out of that hospital every day, go pick up my kids from school, make a family meal, take them to sports, pick up some groceries, and then race back to the hospital for 8 p.m., 9 p.m., get hooked up again. It was like living this complete double life, but it gave me this sense of purpose. I was still needed in this world. And I'm sure a million other people could have done that. But for me to cope with everything going on, I needed to have my sense of purpose. And that was it. So as hard as that made it, right? Everyone's like, just rest, just do this. And I believe wholeheartedly, I've had so many transformations on getting off that go, go, go autopilot mode and really honoring the rest that we need. And I'm very respectful to that. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, keeping our sense of purpose and not letting everyone take over our sense of responsibilities and our jobs. I like to cut my own potatoes, and do all that stuff on my own because it makes me feel like I have a sense of purpose. Anyhow, finally in the spring of 2017, after just years of ups and downs and surviving so many relentless, seemingly insurvivable feats, I started on my climb back, and I was so weak at first. And gosh, I remember those moments. It was so hard even just to step up over a curb. And 6 weeks after I was finally home, my husband had said he wanted to divorce. And it was a really difficult time for the family, as you can imagine. He pretty much watched me die over and over and over again. And the stresses that had on the relationship were plentiful. But at the same time, that decision was when I was barely back on my feet for recovering. And I then had to face a move and adjusting to life as a single mom and, reinventing myself somewhat at the same time. I couldn't go back to work as a sports chiropractor. I was always going to be too immune compromised to return to work in that profession. Anyhow, through all of that, it really shifted me onto this whole path that I'm on now in terms of speaking and coaching others, navigating through hard days, and the podcast and through my writing ventures and just social media at large. And I felt so alone on that journey, even though I was never physically alone. I had 60 people come to see me in that hospital room every single day, but you can still feel so alone unless you're connecting with those who really understand the depth of hardship, and everyone that would come in, they'd get to go to work. They would get to go home for dinner with their families. And I was the one who was really stuck in there. And so you can still feel so alone, even when you're enveloped with these worldwide forces of love and support. It seems strange because never was I alone, but I still felt so alone navigating all of this. And so that's why I do everything that I do now, just to make sure that no one else feels that sense of solitude. And you can really question yourself and the feelings that you're going through, right? Like the fear or the guilt or all of these things that pass through you, like these sudden waves that overcome you sometimes. And you can feel self-judgment that you cast on yourself, or even for being diagnosed with cancer, all these things that come through you. And so that's why I try to create this really open platform of support and conversation, and to really help others navigate through hard days, and to really serve as this beacon of hope, because I'm alive despite international forces that told me otherwise, and there is always that thread of hope. And we really need to take that accountability within ourselves. And I always, try to teach my clients to become, the hero in their own story, because although there are all these profound, knowledgeable medical physicians on our side and all of these resources, you can look up so many cancer treatments online, right? It's like plentiful, so many that you can choose from. It's endless, really. But at the end of the day, no matter what you resonate with in terms of treatment, no matter what, like there's still so much you need to do inside, and fuel your mind, fuel your body, fuel your soul, and take accountability for your own environment. There's a really great quote that I love that says, you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. And so if I don't I'm not ever saying accountability, I want to say off the get-go, does not equal responsibility. And so I'm not saying I'm responsible for getting cancer or that anybody is, right? But if I don't take accountability for having cancer, I also can't take responsibility for my success or my unfortunate outcome, right? I need to take accountability for all the factors that I can control, right? In my own environment, whether that's food, whether that's what goes through my mind. Like I always say to be your own human filter, like what are you allowing in here? Like what are you listening to for podcasts? Do you listen to the news every day? Like, what are you watching on television? What about the radio? What kind of music? Are you being uplifted by that? Are you being inspired by that? Or is it taking energy away from you? Because if it's taking energy away from you, then that can't be helping you to heal, So be the human filter of what goes in.
I have a question on that. So when you talk about being a human filter, let's slow down a second, because this is a key part of health that I think gets overlooked. We tend to look at fitness. We tend to look at food. So let's stop a second and talk about that idea of controlling or managing, let's say, managing our thoughts, managing the inputs and the outputs in terms of what we think. Let's talk a little bit about how mindset has been a part of your journey.
Yeah. So I'll take it even a step back from that. So, like I said, my previous life before, I was so go, 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 go. I was so successful in my multidisciplinary health practice. When my 8 to 4 filled up, I would start to work from, going in at 5 a.m. and staying till 10 p.m. I could never leave somebody in pain. I always felt so compelled to help. I felt so inspired by that. I loved serving. I loved doing what I was doing, but I was always so stuck on autopilot. Then I would go run 10 kilometers or, just go hike in the trees and be so go, go, go. And I was always thinking ahead to what was next. I was never soaking in the value of the moment of right here and right now. I was always putting out energy. I wasn't receiving in any energy. I wasn't taking that time for myself to calm, to reflect, to grow within, right? There's an expression, if we're not growing, we're dying. And I was doing all of this energy output, but I was never receiving energy input. And that is, I think, where I really was out of balance per se going into this. And on the other side of this now, I had this powerful moment where we had to hire, back in 2012 when I had leukemia, we had to hire this new nanny to help with my boys. And she was a complete stranger to me. I barely knew her. And there was this one day that she brought my boys in to see me in the hospital. And my boys had climbed into bed with me. And all of a sudden I just saw her sitting in the corner of the room. And I was just so struck by her presence with this complete stranger having access to our family's most vulnerable and truly most intimate of moments, And it felt wrong. I almost felt violated in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she left with, and that's what you feel a lot of, is being violated in these moments. Like I was institutionalized against my will. I did not see this coming. You really feel this sense of just everything being taken away from you, and why, you question your everything. Anyhow, I'll take it back to this moment. And this nanny left with my boys, and I watched them walk down the hall. And then from my penthouse view above, I could see the parking lot down below. And I watched her as they walked outside. I watched her put my babies into my vehicle. And all of a sudden, my mind just was in a flurry.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh, is she going to speed when she drives home? Is she going to shoulder check when she changes lanes? Like, does she realize what precious cargo she has in that vehicle with her? And I wanted to be the one driving home with my kids. I wanted to be going home and making them a dinner, a healthy meal. I wanted to be tucking them into bed that night. This was my job. This wasn't hers, but I was stuck. And I watched her drive off with my babies. And I was all alone without anyone in the room at this point, which was rare for me at this point. And I watched her drive. I watched my vehicle drive entirely out of sight. And that is the most physical pain I've ever had on this journey. My heart physically drove away with that vehicle out of my chest. And I turned around from the window and I just sunk to the floor, and I grabbed my knees in tight to my chest, and I wept 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 for days on end. And I didn't stop. And in our world today, that's a problem. That is when the medical team recruits their top team psychologist, psychiatrist, and they come in with their little clipboards and they're like, I heard you've been crying. I'm going to prescribe you X, Y, Z. And I said, no. Like, I just need to feel this. Like, cancer came in. I had to miss my oldest son's 5th birthday party that I planned for months. I had to abruptly stop nursing my youngest son. I wasn't ready for that. Like, I had to grieve the moments of all that had just been brutally, brutally ripped away. And not only that, but in that time, I had finally allowed myself this space to grieve all those traumas that I had pushed down through the years from childhood onwards, that I had just pushed down and been like, oh yeah, I'm fine, no problem. We've all had, and I'm not saying I was abused or any like significant trauma, but we've all had hurt. At the end of the day, hurt is hurt, no matter what we've experienced. Pain is pain. And it's the common thread that goes through us all. And there are all moments that we've all pushed down, right? And I believe until we really release those and experience those, they kind of stay within us. And who knows, like maybe they become physical illness, maybe they become mental illness, who knows, right? But I finally allowed myself this space to grieve all this stuff that I had bottled up for so long. And I cried for days. And I really had to advocate for myself. But that moment was such a profound release for me and a complete shift and a transformation. If I say I did one thing that helped me attain remission, it was probably that over everything else. It was this complete halt that I described my life as before cancer to after cancer. And it's really this moment that was a complete halt for me, because instantly I was off autopilot. I was off that go, go, go nature. I think I finally, maybe I was running from that emotion before, and emotional avoidance strategy. I just kept myself too busy, right? And then that wasn't good for my health either. But in that moment, it was like, it's okay to feel these things, and then I was able to have this calm in my heart that I had never otherwise had before. And I could really sink in and be in the moment of right here and right now. And that powerfully helped me on my journey after. Eckhart Tolle often says, stress arises when we are here in this moment, but we want to be there, right? And so I was living this life of stress before, being so go, go, go. What's coming next? What's coming next? As we all often are, even if we're stuck in traffic, we're stressed because we want to be there, right? But we can't do anything about that. And so I really adapted and learned and had this enlightenment, if you want to say, this awakening to sinking into the power of right here and right now, and maximizing this power of right here and right now. And that means really, so many of us miss the value of a moment until it's done. And now I don't miss the value of any one of those moments. I'm totally enriched in the power of right here and right now. And it's helped me live this beautiful, rich, and life of gratitude and depth. And I just see the world in a different way. And gosh, I think I've lived a million more lives each and every day that I've been gifted since this journey than I ever would have before. And I just celebrated on July 31st. A couple of weeks ago, I celebrated my 10th bonus year after hearing that I had only had 2 months to live. And that was super, super special. On August 1st, that marked my 7th year of breathing through new lungs. I'm just the luckiest girl in the world. One of my physicians early on had told me, Erica, you've just been, you've taken an exit ramp off of your highway, and you're going to find that entrance ramp. You're going to get right back on. But over time, like, my heavens, I just kept getting knocked down and knocked down and knocked down. Even if I would just like come back to the surface for a sip of air, it seemed like I would be brutally ripped back down again. And I was like, where's the entrance ramp, Steve? Like, where is this darn entrance ramp? I'm ready for it. Like, where is it? And over time, that was really frustrating for me. But over time, I've come to realize that sometimes these things in life come not to just give us a little pause from the highway we were on, but to totally kick us off that highway and put us onto this new path, this new trajectory, this new highway over here that we were always perhaps supposed to be meant to be for. But we maybe made a glitch somewhere along our choosing, and we ended up over here. And sometimes these huge life events come to propel us back to where we always should have been in the first place. And that's exactly where I feel I am. And I just feel like this, like I've been chosen almost to go through this crazy, tumultuous tidal wave, to be pummeled around and around and around, to get to come out of it, to serve in the capacity that I now do, and to do all that I've done with, Rise Today, my website, risetoday.com. I just love my pursuits that I get to do now through these speaking and coaching and podcast ventures. And it's not that I didn't love my job as a sports chiropractor. I certainly did. I just feel like the impact is so much greater here.
I think it's powerful to pause a moment on that point that you made, that we tend to think of life as this one path, right? And we get so focused on that path that we don't always recognize that there are other opportunities, there are other directions that we could head. You said, where's the on-ramp? Well, maybe that freeway, you were supposed to turn left, or you were supposed to turn right.
Yeah.
And there's this power of embracing the current path that you're on, is what I'm hearing you say, instead of pining for that other right path, whether it was the marriage or the job or whatever. It's finding the blessing and finding the light where you are, and
finding
shifting
the appreciation for it all, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I've come to appreciate that everything in life really is a blessing or a lesson, right? And even if you look at my marriage, my heavens, like, I was devastated that ended, and losing that family unit of 4. That is something that cancer came to steal from me. Devastated, right? But at the same time, look at the gifts I've been given in my 2 boys, right? Like, such a gift. And also, it was interesting because I spoke with a psychologist, I think, amidst all the divorce and after, like, the double lung transplant and all the ups and downs. I was speaking with someone about it on a few occasions, and she had a really interesting perspective. And granted, I think she was divorced 6 times, little sidebar. But she did say, people come into our lives for different reasons. And maybe he came into your life at that point to really help you through this journey, because he was amazing. My husband was amazing. He knew my medicine more than anybody else did. Like, he was just burnt out by the end of it, I think. And I am alive today largely because he kept me alive, and he caught medicine glitches. He did so much in my path, and I'm forever grateful. That's a blessing to me. As hard as divorce was, that's a blessing. He helped me through that journey in a way that maybe somebody else couldn't have, right? They may have stayed by my side, but I wouldn't have had that same support necessarily, or, just different.
So you talk about gratitude as well. And,
yes.
You've talked about living life to the fullest. We've talked about mindset. Just for a moment, touch on gratitude and how important that has been?
Sure, I would love to. Gratitude can change our attitude, change our perspective, change anything in a heartbeat, just like that. So if I am going in for chemo treatment that I used to do back in the day, or, even blood transfusions today, that's going to be a good chunk of my day. Let's say I have to do it later this afternoon. I'm going for 2 transfusions, 2 immunoglobulin transfusions that just keep me strong and give me an extra boost every day. But to be honest, it's a beautiful sunny day here in Vancouver, and I'd rather probably go to the beach, right? But if I focus on, oh, shoot, I'd rather be there, that's not going to be good for my mindset, is it? And so I switched that to being like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see XYZ nurse, or, whoever's at the hospital today that I wouldn't have otherwise met. I wouldn't have otherwise had these experiences to be enriched by these people. I walk into Vancouver General Hospital and I feel like I've won the Super Bowl, like from the nurses to the lunch ladies, to the cleaners and the porters and the imaging staff and all the physicians and gosh, everybody in between. Like they all know me, right? I used to try to convince the porters to like take me outside on spins sometimes. Like they all know me inside and out, and they have witnessed everyone on the outside. They know what I've gone through, but these people have witnessed it, and so when they see me walking in, they are always literally aghast. They're like, oh my gosh, Erica, you look so good. And they are so happy to see me doing so well. And I feel like I've won the Super Bowl every single time I walk in those doors. And so I think even if I were having a bad day and I weren't booked to go to the hospital, I would probably just go stand in the foyer at VGH and just be enveloped in all that love that I would get there, to be honest. You can switch your perspective in a heartbeat. I'll give you I know time is short for me, but I will give you one example on this. So post-traumatic stress, let's say PTSD, I admit I get a lot of that. I wake up with it at night, and I'll wake up from the comforts of my own bedroom and, having the coziest of sleeps. And I will sit up completely erect, sweating. My heart is racing in my mind. I feel for the shackles that used to hold me to my ICU bed. I feel for all the tubes that once were connected to all parts of me. I feel for the bedside rails. I feel for the sheets, and I can hear all the beeps and the buzzes and the screams of agony from patients down the hall. And I'm in this complete frenzy, like I'm still in the hospital. And then I slowly kind of come to, and I start to see that since being single, I've painted my bedroom walls like a fuchsia color almost for this very moment, because as soon as I connect with the pink, the fuchsia, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm home. Because it's not the white walls, 4 white walls in my hospital room. And I'm like, okay, Erica Jane, you're home. Breathe it in. The boys are down the hall. They're sleeping. We had the best day today. I'm alive. Oh my gosh, I'm alive, and it's a completely different shift. And then I'm just overcome with emotion for getting to be alive. My boys are now 15 and 12, 10 years later, right? How lucky am I to get to be alive 10 years later and to be on their path at this point? And I'm overcome with gratitude. And I'm literally in tears in these moments. I go from this complete frenzy in the matter of minutes, seconds. I don't even know how long it lasts. It's like, I'm so overcome with emotion. And then I'm overcome with this gratitude. And so, yep, definite moments of PTSD, but I've come to shift to call those moments my gratitude attacks, because they never let me forget how lucky I am to be here each and every day. When I was first diagnosed, on the same line, when I was first diagnosed with leukemia, I didn't know how to explain it to my kids. It's such a big cancer. They were so tiny. If I said the word cancer, I would crumble. And so I came to come up with this analogy that we all have these fighters to fight colds and bugs, but that mama's fighters were just not strong enough at the time. And I needed to go to the hospital to make my fighters stronger. And that's in keeping with the nature of leukemia and not having strong enough white blood cells. And so as I was leaving for the hospital, my oldest was then 4. And he's always had this affinity for making any room a brighter and happier space. Like he's just this ray of sunshine, he makes everyone happy. And just as he did on this really dark day, and all of a sudden we had this huge house, like kind of veranda, like stairwell. He's at the top of the stairwell. My husband and I were leaving to go to the hospital, and he shouts out, "Go fighters, go mama." And that instantly became what I refer to as like my personal power statement. You know, I would shout it out sometimes, go fighters, go mama, go fighters, like screaming it out in my mind when there were moments where I didn't think I could get through the next minute, because it always honed me back in on what I was fighting for, right? On the golden prize at the end of the line, go fighters, go mama, go fighters, go mama. And still today, you know, we can all get caught up in the muddle of life, the chaos. Like I'm a mom of 2 boys, right? They're going to bicker and they're going to argue at times. And it can get stressful for any parent, let alone a single parent, right? And so instantly though, because my mind is so in tune through awareness to shift to that go fighters go, it pops into my mind all the time. And instead of being chaotic about it, instantly it's like a mindset shift for me where it hones me in and I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to be here in this moment and I get to help them through this moment. And so again, that point of gratitude, right, really comes back in all senses, and it shifts your perspective like that to a happier, lighter, more elevated state.
That is powerful. Well, I know we're short on time. I wanted to take a moment and just thank you so much for saying yes to me and for, you know, I just let you share because your story, I think, has so many points of encouragement and empowerment. And I'm grateful that you have taken such a horrible journey and turned it into something so beautiful. It's inspirational, and, you know, not to over trivialize it, but you really have managed to use it in the best way possible. And it's really inspiring. And I'm really grateful that you've taken the time to be on the show today.
I really feel blessed to be here. Thank you. And if your listeners want to get in touch with me, I would welcome that. That's no problem. They can find me. I'm Dr. Erica Harris. risetoday.com is my website. Instagram is probably where I'm most active. 60 Days to Live, 2012. And otherwise, all my social media platforms are at Dr. Erica Harris.
Awesome. Friends, today I've been talking with Dr. Erica Harris. She's a TEDx speaker, a podcast host, cancer survivor, a double lung transplant recipient, and so much more. If you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 283, I will have those links that Erica shared in the show notes. Friends, I hope that you really enjoyed the conversation today. When I saw Dr. Erica on Instagram and started following her, I thought this is a story that I would love to share, because the overarching theme is what she said, soaking in the value of every moment, no matter how difficult it is, and watching the energy we take in and the energy that we put out. A lot of us in midlife are at a crossroads. A lot of us feel like we don't know what's next. A lot of us are in transition of some sort. And I just really felt that as dramatic as this story is, the foundational principles that Erica shared can be applied to any situation. And we are able and capable to shift the way we think about something. And that thinking shift affects our feelings. And that helps our brains wire in a way that's supportive of our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. So I hope this has been an encouragement to you. Please take the time to subscribe, rate, share this message with a friend. And while you're at my website, at the very bottom, there is a way to sign up for my email list. I send out periodic encouraging emails. I'd love to have you be a part of the tribe. Friends, thank you for listening today, for taking the time. I hope there's been something here for you. Let me know what you think, and let Erica know how this impacted you. Have a wonderful day, my friends. I look forward to bringing more inspirational messages to you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.